They don't make them like they used to. You've heard people say that, and you've probably said it yourself. Well, I found myself saying that over this last weekend when I decided to rewatch both Magnificent Seven movies. Now, I grew up watching the original Magnificent Seven movie, and I've seen that movie probably 20 times. Well, on my 21st watch, I absolutely loved it, just like I did when I was a kid. That movie is absolutely fantastic. As soon as I finished watching that, I started right into the second movie. And I did not enjoy that experience as much as the first film, so much so that I found myself sitting back on the couch as soon as the credits rolled, and I thought to myself, wow, they sure don't make them like they used to. And that got me thinking on why that is, but it also got me thinking on the state of film as a whole. And I want to go ahead and spoil the ending of this video and say that it took me to a place of just sheer optimism when I really started to think about all the films that are coming out now. It is fairly rare to run across a film that makes you say they don't make them like they used to. There have been so many great films just this year alone, but when you look back in the catalog of last year was one of the best years for film that I can remember. So much so that I feel like we are in a renaissance of filmmaking that I think people will look back on 10, 20, 30 years down the line and say, wow, that was a renaissance of filmmaking. So when I had this experience of watching a remake and just being saddened by it and bored by it and just saying, gosh, this is not as good as the original, that led me to a place of optimism because I realized I don't say that as much as I used to. Regardless, I want to take a few minutes and just highlight some of the reasons why I think a lot of movies give us the feeling of they don't make them like they used to. I think there are a few key problems that I noticed while watching both of these Magnificent Seven movies. So let's jump right into it. What can you say about the original Magnificent Seven film that hasn't already been said a million times? This movie is just incredible. Magnificent, if you will. The story is a tale as old as time, yet it manages to offer something so unique and special and charming. And this is wholly due to the incredible cast. Everyone in this movie is just absolutely on their A game, from the villagers to the Seven, and of course Eli Wallach putting in an amazing performance. But I definitely want to highlight the villagers because this will be relevant later. The villagers in this movie are the heart and soul. They are hilarious, they are endearing, they are kind, they are confident, they are strong. They are fully developed characters, but not only that, they are the audience's gateway into the Seven, into the movie, because the Seven is the Seven, but the villagers are like us. We can relate to them. And the fact that that movie puts so much of an emphasis on developing them as characters and putting the focus on them and spending so much time with them was just truly amazing. But the same can be said for the Seven. When we look at them, they're not just seven gunslingers. They're seven men with different characteristics, different personalities, different fears, different motives, and that all shines through so brilliantly in this movie. Yul Brynner was such a unique, confident, and charismatic movie star. He brought such a gravitas to any role he took on, whether it was dancing and singing in The King and I, or in a Western as a gunslinger within the Magnificent Seven and Westworld. And then you have Steve McQueen, who is just so freaking cool in literally anything he does. It would be impossible for Steve McQueen not to be awesome in anything he's in. But it's the dynamic between these two characters that really shines in this movie. The little bits of dialogue between these two characters as they get to know each other, become friends, and have similar moral compasses. Their relationship blossoms in this movie, and it's such a joy to watch. And then you have other characters like Charles Bronson, who is just the toughest, manliest man ever, and yet is the heart of this film, which was a truly brilliant move by the filmmakers. He provides such a beautiful depiction of masculinity that proves you can be emotional and vulnerable while also being a literal brick wall of solid muscle. Just look at that man chop wood. Look at him go. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is early on in the film when Yul Brynner's character agreed to help the villagers protect their villages, looking to gather a team. Assemble the Seven, if you will. And the first person he meets with is Steve McQueen. McQueen initially brushes off the idea because it doesn't pay very well, but it's in this little interaction at the table where he gets to know the villagers, he hears their earnestness, he hears how kind they are, how good-hearted they are, and in getting to know them, getting to know Yul Brynner's character, you see this change of heart in Steve McQueen, and he recognizes that this is the right thing to do. And in that moment, he makes the choice to come along and help them on their adventure. And that is exactly what's missing from the 2017 remake. Look, this movie isn't horrible. In many ways, it is very well made, well casted, and a decent Western. Hey, I love the director and all his other films, but it is just missing the charm and the thoughtfulness of the original. And I think the perfect example of this is with The Villagers. They are the heart, the soul, the humor, and as I mentioned before, the gateway for the audience to really invest themselves in the story. And in the remake, that is completely taken out. Aside from the fact that all the villagers were completely whitewashed for literally no reason in the remake, they also feel one-dimensional. If a movie from 1960 is more culturally rich and diverse than a movie from 2017, what is going on here? Another example would be similar to that of the scene I mentioned previously with Steve McQueen, Yul Brynner, and the villagers. There is really no such scene in the remake. There are, of course, scenes where Denzel is, trying to gather the team. Of course, there's those building the team scenes, but they're just not the same. It just feels like they're doing it to do it. And I think that's my biggest issue with the remake. The original felt authentic. It felt real. It felt like the people in the movie and behind the camera cared about it. The remake felt like a remake for remake's sake. It felt like it was just a by committee Western with the theme music and name of Magnificent Seven slapped on top of it. Another big issue I have with the remake that isn't my biggest gripe, but it is a problem I have with it, is just the brutality, the gunfights, and the violence in this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a big fan of all three of those things in movies. I love a good action movie. I could watch the John Wick films all day long, and the more action, the better. I love it. But that is not what these movies are. Brutality, gunfights, and violence do not a good Western make. If you actually think back to it, the original film only has a couple scenes of violence, and that is why they're so memorable, because they are few and far between, but when they pop up, they punch you in the gut, they are hard-hitting, and they are memorable. A modern example of this done right would be 3:10 to Yuma, because that movie also uses violence sparingly. I remember watching that movie as a kid, and even then kind of realizing that, oh, okay, I guess this movie isn't about the gunfights. There are gunfights in it, but it's not a gunfight shoot 'em up movie. It's a story about one man trying to transport another man to a train, and it's this all the interactions in between that are the story. Gunfights happen in that story, but that is not the story. The remake of The Magnificent Seven is a gunfight put to music simply to sell tickets. Now, I do want to make very clear that this is not the worst movie I've ever seen. It is not even a bad movie. It's a fine movie, especially when it comes to the performances. He's Denzel. Obviously, he's amazing in this. Vincent D'Onofrio is another standout. Ethan Hawke, my man, one of my favorites, is amazing in this. The cast is great. Chris Pratt is also really, really good in this. It's not a terrible movie. If this movie had been called The Stupendous Six, it would be a different review, but because it's carrying the Magnificent Seven name, I hold it to a higher standard, and the fact that it falls so short from the original, the issues and the lack of charm just become more glaring. But on its own, if you watch it in pure isolation, it's not a horrible film, and you will have a good time. So I do want to make that clear. I'm not trying to just bag on this movie. It's not a horrible movie, but there are definitely better Westerns out there, namely the original. So like I said at the beginning, this whole thoughtful journey of trying to figure out why movies aren't made like they used to brought me to a wonderful and optimistic place, and a place of just pure appreciation for all the amazing movies that come out nowadays. And one thing I would suggest whenever you feel yourself asking, why don't they make them like they used to? I would always recommend look for the good. When you've seen something bad, when you've seen a movie you didn't enjoy, let's say in my example here, I did not enjoy the Magnificent Seven remake. My first thought was 3:10 to Yuma. Rather than wallowing in the sadness of they don't make them like they used to, I decided to look to other modern Westerns and find an example where they do make them like they used to. And 3:10 to Yuma is a fantastic film that feels like an old Western but made for modern audiences. And so I would recommend doing that whenever you run across this feeling of feeling like there are just no good movies anymore, because there always are. You just have to look for them. As always, thanks so much for watching, y'all. It really means the world and means so much to me. Definitely drop a comment down below and let me know what your favorite Western is. I'm curious to know. I love watching Westerns, and so I am always looking for recommendations. So definitely drop some in the comments below and let me know. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. And always remember to enjoy everything.